Gente, sapete che stiamo giocando in live Hollow Knight Silksong, giusto? C'è un video che in realtà avrei voluto vedere un po' di tempo fa in anticipo, prima di Hollow Knight Silksong, diciamo come preparazione, e per varie ragioni non l'abbiamo visto. Ho deciso di rimediare, d'accordo? Lo divideremo in due parti, ok? Perché il video è molto lungo, però è non un documentario questa volta, ma è un video completo della storia e della lore totale, no? Onnicomprensiva di Hollow Knight. D'accordo? E credo che sarà una cosa figa da vedere e soprattutto è utile anche a me, perché io vi dico sinceramente che pur avendolo giocato il primo Hollow Knight, della lore e della storia ho capito molto poco, è tutto molto criptico e io faccio schifo in questi casi, non riesco bene a cogliere. Perciò, ragazzi, è quello che vedremo proprio adesso. Un canale molto figo che si chiama Skyrion ed è... ovviamente ci saranno i sottotitoli, ragazzi. Che grazie a Dio però ci sono i sottotitoli, quelli veri, in inglese, che sono tradotti automaticamente, ma dovrebbero essere un po' meglio di quelli completamente automatici. D'accordo? Ok, quindi, come sempre, mutiamo l'audio di sottofondo e pronti? Eccoci qua.
In the wilds across a vast wasteland lay a region that would one day become home
Molto
to the
British,
grand
lui.
kingdom of Hallownest, a tragic tale of light and darkness. Many ages before, deep underground, into the very bedrock of the tunnels was a civilization. The bugs here devoted their worship not to a lord, power, or king, but to the very darkness itself, the Void. Even now, not a lot is known about this ancient civilization deep down in the abyss of the Void. What we do know is that these bugs were intelligent and expanded their reach into the tunnels and open caverns above. They discovered that soul animated and gave their bodies life, a powerful force that flowed through the very air itself. To contain and manipulate this substance, these ancient bugs constructed soul totems. Across the lands, their civilization created weapons through nailsmiths. Their scholars recorded their history on arcane eggs, and some were believed to have weaponized the very void itself. Their constructions were magnificent. It was as if the rock itself possessed a will and adapted to the desire of the bugs that inhabited this region. Despite how grand this civilization became, one day it simply came to an end. Looking back, it is unknown
grazie mille,
what
benvenuto.
happened to this ancient civilization, but in their fall, artifacts of their triumphs became a part of the land. The bodies of the largest inhabitants decayed and showed those who traveled through that a civilization once existed here. Deep down in the abyss, the void simply existed in a sea of darkness. And when there is darkness, there is also light to counter it. This greater world was large and home to many bugs with simple thoughts. There were, however, higher beings of great power. One of these was the Radiance. This giant moth was one of the most powerful creatures, and she shone brightly. As a being of light, the Radiance became an instant enemy to the Void. As a higher being, the Radiance had natural incredible abilities. On the land of this fallen civilization, the Radiance brought into existence a new intelligent species. Having been created by a higher being, the Moth tribe worshipped the Radiance and her light. They basked in it. The Radiance was a beacon of light. Alongside her ability to create life and light, she also taught the Moth how to interact with, influence, and manipulate Essence. Essence powered dreams, and in turn, the entirety of the Dream Realm, a realm separated from the physical world by a veil. Now, the expanse of dreams once consisted of dreams and nightmares. However, at one point in time, these realms were split. Under the guidance of the Radiants, the Moth tribe discovered the countless realms of dreams. Each one was formed from the memories of the living and the dead. An entire realm could be formed from thought and will alone. From the bugs, plants, and gods of the land, the dream realms were home to almost anything that the imagination could form, all powered by essence that floated like dust in these powerful realms. As for the Nightmare realm, it was also powered by a sort of essence, flame. These realms were similar but darker in nature to the dream realm. Controlled by the Nightmare Heart, another higher being, troops were sent out to ruined lands to collect Nightmare Essence flames to fuel the Nightmare Heart. In their devotion and worship of the Radiants, the Moth tribe explored essence, soul, and dreams. In this exploration, they created the Dream Nail. This powerful nail was incredible. The Moths pierced the veil between the waking and the dream worlds. They extracted soul and essence from living creatures. They used the dream world to essentially teleport across vast distances with dream gates, and they even entered the minds of the bugs around them to discover their darkest secrets. Yet, some minds were too powerful to penetrate. These dream
Che
walkers have been
stranissima lore
crafted with
questa
a
qua,
light
cioè
brighter than
è
essence,
peculiare.
and under
Soprattutto
the
non riesco a
Radiant's
capire da
lead,
dove l'avresti
they
dovuto
learned
capire.
how to shape dreams. The light also kept the void at bay. The Radiant had used her light to create life. She had offered them knowledge of and access to the dream realms. All she wanted in return was their worship. And yet, the Radiant was not the only higher being that had come to this land. To the west, the giant slug Un dreamt of a world of luscious leaves, luxurious bushes,
Dai vari aculi del sogno e
swirling
testimonianze che trovi sul
vines, lakes
bestiario.
of acid,
Ah,
and
quindi devi
green children to
leggere le
walk
descrizioni di ogni
amongst the
cosa, ok.
forests. As a higher being of light, her dream
La
transformed
narrazione
the
silenziosa tipica dei
barren,
Souls,
rocky
ok.
caverns of this bleak land into lush chambers full of vegetation and lakes. From her dream also walked the Mothkin into the physical world, the green children of Un. These once empty caverns, chambers, tunnels, and basins became home to the life, soul, and essence of Greenpath. Within, the green children of Un, just like the Moth tribe of the Radiants, worshipped their god and erected temples to honor and worship her, one of which was constructed at the Lake of Un, a site that the higher being communed
E lo
with
stile è
her
meraviglioso.
children.
Mi piace tantissimo.
Each plant and bug, no matter how big or
È proprio
small,
bello,
was
bello, bello.
important to the Mothkin, for they had been created within the mind of Un. Because of this, the Mothkin tribe were very territorial and protective of Greenpath and those who sought to explore it. To the southeast of Greenpath lay the fungal wastes. It was in the southern part of this region that the Mantis tribe formed a village. The Mantis did not appear to worship any higher being and were completely self-sufficient. Led by their Mantis lords, the youngest
Oh,
of this tribe were encouraged
mi
to
ricordo la
kill
prima
to
volta che li ho
prove their
affrontati.
strength, to claim their place in the tribe. The Mantis valued honor and tradition. They did not like outsiders, but did at least respect one if they engaged in an honorable fight. If their challenger died, they died. However, if they lived, they were offered freedom to explore the village. The Mantis' ability to defend themselves did come in useful. To the west of their village, Deepnest became home to the Spider tribe, and later the Weaver tribe, who had traveled from a faraway land.
Tremendi quei
Many
posti.
speculated this to be Falu. At this moment, this is just speculation. The inhabitants of Deepnest were arguably the most intelligent species of this land. The Weavers crafted stories, shields, and spells on their looms as they recorded their history on spools. Their village was meticulously crafted by the arachnids who created houses of silk that hung across a deep cavern. It was in these that their king and queen monitored the population, and their midwife helped birth children. It was also here
la
that
levatrice.
the arachnids
Ok.
plotted to expand their reach by force across the land. The issue they had was that the mantis blocked their access to it. The entirety of this land had once worshipped the void, and after that civilization had fallen, many more had popped up and claimed their regions. From the distant village of Deepnest, the Mantis Lords of Mantis Village, to the Moskin of Greenpath, the mysterious snail shamans that manipulated soul into power spells, the Dreamwalkers of the Moth, and even the emptiness of the Abyss. This land had awoken once again. Across it, there were also simple-minded bugs without true thoughts. They just wandered in the darkness. As the ages passed, these colonies lived on and thrived in their homes. Within Greenpath, however, the Moskin noticed that Un had started
ciao.
to fade away.
Lui ti informa,
and her
informa è una
interactions
parola
with them
grossa, ma
reduced
si
in
va avanti,
number.
insomma.
She
Ciao, Luigi.
promised that one day she would call for them to return to the dream they had come from. Until then, they just had to be patient. To the east of Greenpath, another species came to the Verdant region. This was a family of hunters who even hunted each other for fun. Over their time there, the family moved away
Occhio,
until
grazie
only
mille.
one remained, alone in his small area of Greenpath. As it burrowed through the mountains of the wasteland, a worm finally stopped and settled. The worm were, just like Un and the Radiants, higher beings of light.
Stefano
This
TV, grazie
worm
mille
looked
del
at the
raid.
land ahead
Benvenuti,
and saw
ragazzi.
what it could become. Of the many abilities of this god species, the worm could see the future to an extent. He saw that this land could become a grand kingdom if he let it. The land was home to many bugs of sentient mind, but there were many others that clawed in the darkness, unaware
Evil
of
Chuck.
anything, just
Jordan, grazie mille dei
bugs.
follow, ragazzi.
He would become their king. In order to do this, the worm entered a process of metamorphosis and shed his large form. He became small, just like them. In this new form, the worm went by the title of the Pale King, as his shell transformed the kingdom's edge into an ashen wasteland as it decayed. The Pale King was a being of power, and as he looked at the land ahead of him, he claimed it as the Kingdom of Hallownest. The worm in general had incredible abilities. Not only could the king see the future and pull lesser bugs into his thrall, but he also formed a beacon that instilled the simple-minded bugs of Hallownest with sentience and intelligence. Under his beacon, the bugs of Hallownest saw the Pale King as the leader, ruler,
questo
and
video è fatto
the higher
benissimo,
being who
oltretutto.
had created everything within Hallownest. Yet an issue arose for those who sought to leave the
Occhio, grazie
kingdom.
mille.
For if they moved too far away from Hallownest, they would relinquish the precious mind that the king had granted them. For the bugs already with sapience, their time in Hallownest, for the most part, would become a distant, foggy memory. By the Pale King's side was the White Lady, another higher being of Roots. Under the leadership of Worm and Roots, Hallownest would thrive. Their union was solidified with the King's Soul, a charm with two halves that, when combined, produced unlimited soul from the very air. In the depths of the land, just above the abyss, the palace grounds were constructed, and within, so too was the White Palace. This place became home to the Pale King, White Lady, and those chosen to be their royal retainers. The king was fascinated with the void below and wanted to form the entire kingdom of Hallownest above the palace. Void was an interesting and mysterious force. To keep it calm, the king had a lighthouse constructed within the abyss and ordered one of his subjects to keep the light active at all times. With Void passive in this state, the king had some of the substance brought to his palace so that he could experiment with and explore it in his workshop. From his work, the king created several Void constructs. He filled heavy white armor with the substance, for Void had no will and no mind to think. In this state, it did what the king commanded. These armored Void entities were named King's Molds and were stationed within and across the palace to defend it. The Pale King stayed within his palace and rarely left. But from here, he had a lot of work to do. The bugs of Hallownest had sworn their loyalty to their king. He had promised them that Hallownest would last eternal, and he truly believed it would. Although many bugs had woken up and gained the ability to think, feel, and act of their own accord, many of the bugs of this land already had these abilities. In an attempt to develop a working Grand Kingdom, the Pale King reached out to the tribes that existed within the borders of his Hallownest to unite the land. Each tribe could offer something valuable. Over the ages, the Moth tribe had still worshipped the Radiance and her light, but several turned their backs on her and chose to worship the Pale King instead when he asked. For their place in Hallownest, the Moth offered their ability to communicate with the Dream Realm. In doing so, they became the caretakers of the dead. Within the resting ground and Spirit's Glade, the Moths granted the bugs of Hallownest a place of sanctuary, peace and serenity before and after death. They conducted rituals, communed with the departed, and helped those who grieved accept their loss through the manipulation of essence. To the west, the hive-minded mushrooms of the fungal waste saw the king's power of foresight as a form of protection. So they accepted his offer to join the kingdom. The Mosskin of Greenpath waited for the call of Un to return to the dream. Yet, while territorial, they welcomed the Pale King and allowed him to have roads constructed across their land. However, they also left a warning. If any strayed from the king's road, they would face the laws of Un. The Pale King also asked for more from the Mosskin. He and the White Lady liked the luscious region of Greenpath so much that they decided to claim the entire southern region. The Queen's Garden still resembled the dream that Un had created it from, but as a retreat for the Queen, it was adapted with greenhouses
Mi ricordo
and
quel
statues
punto.
of royalty. As this area had been annexed from Greenpath, it was heavily guarded and only those chosen by the King or Queen were allowed access. While several of the tribes within the borders of Hallownest had agreed to become a part of the kingdom, there were others who refused to cooperate. The Weaver and Spider tribe of Deepnest had no interest in becoming a part of the Pale King's kingdom. They wanted the land for themselves. The Mantis tribe also declined the Pale King's offer to join the kingdom of Hallownest. In this case, however, a deal was made between the two parties. The Pale King offered the Mantis Lords their sovereignty if they
Kamisik
kept the
è
aggressive
un video sulla
population
storia e
of
lore
Deepnest
completa di Hollow Knight.
sealed inside, in which they agreed. There was also the bees of the Hive to the east. Their hive had been constructed within the kingdom's borders, but their queen, Queen Vesper, decided to keep out of the problems and politics of a growing kingdom as the Hive sealed their entrances. Although some had chosen not to become a part of the kingdom of Hallownest, the Worm's Beacon did bring travelers from other lands, and they came upon the relics of an ancient civilization, one of which was found to the north of the kingdom's edge. Several travelers discovered the large remains of an ancient beast. It was inside that they formed the Colosseum of Fools, an arena of entertainment where the strongest warriors
Oh, qui ci ho
fought
provato, ragazzi, ma non sono arrivato alla fine.
Having pulled together the tribes of Hallownest, the Pale King and White Lady watched as the rest of the kingdom flourished in the caverns above the White Palace. King's Pass welcomed new bugs to the kingdom of Hallownest with a large bridge that led to the small town of Dirtmouth. Although modest, it offered access to the crossroads below, stores that sold interesting wares, easy access to the top of Crystal Peak, a graveyard for the fallen, and even the opportunity to meet Confessor Gigi, a powerful entity who had the
lui.
ability to manipulate void in return for a rancid egg. The creation of the crossroads below Dirtmouth allowed the kingdom to pulse with life as the bugs explored the towns and cities. Hallownest thrived in trade, refuge, and adventure. While Sol was regarded as a great energy source, Hallownest relied mostly on the crystals of Crystal Peak to power the kingdom. In doing so, it meant that bugs were hired to mine these purple gems with the help of Glimbacks and Shardamites to help them transport the heavy loads. For those who followed the Pilgrim's Way through the verdant wilds of Greenpath and the Fungal Wastes, they would reach the heart of the kingdom, Hallownest's capital city. A place in which they were promised to share in the city's glory. Their wishes would be granted and their truths revealed. During Hallownest's golden age, this city went by one name, but it has been lost to time. Due to many of the events to come, it would later become known as the City of Tears. The heart of Hallownest was
infatti
huge.
mi chiedevo la
The
città
Western Quarter
a
housed
sto
the
punto.
common bug, and the
Hai giocato a
East
Sifu?
housed
Yes.
the more influential,
Al lancio, oltretutto.
wealthier, and royal.
Ciao Marcotto.
Upon their entrance to the city, the pilgrims would have noticed the grand spires that darted into the peak of this cavern. The statues of powerful knights, the guardians who protected the civilians, and they would have heard the melodic sounds of Marissa the songstress from the pleasure house. The city even had a pretty advanced water structure that ran underground. These royal waterways dealt with the city's waste, and for the items that fell down into these
Oh, la
sewers, they
fogna.
slowly collected together and formed a giant pit of junk. Back within the city, the Soul Sanctum offered the Scholars of Soul the ability to explore and understand just what the substance was capable of, as they used soul totems and containers to store it, just as the lost ancient civilization had done ages before. In the highest spire of the city, Lurian the Watcher observed the entire city with his telescope. He was one of the most loyal to his king, and as a high-ranking member of the kingdom, he was even granted Watcher Knights to protect him in his role. As the capital of Hallownest, various materials were imported in from the surrounding regions. Some of many were silks, artwork, and fabrics. While so many resources came in, only few were sent out. This kingdom thrived on their currency of geo, adventure, and many even traded in charms, powerful accessories that contained a spark of power woven into their very cores.
Ok, vengono
They
da qui
offered
allora.
those who wore them the ability to change how they interacted with the world, enhance strength, the potential to manipulate soul at will, to enhance and extend their lives, and protection were just some of many adaptations. Charms were highly sought after, but they were very limited. Each one was unique. There may have been many ways to craft these items, but the darkest secret of the kingdom was that they formed from a dying wish.
Oh, uno dei
The Pale
punti più
King's
belli in
actions had
assoluto,
formed a
quelli,
large
secondo me.
civilization that spanned for miles and miles through several territories and biomes. Yet, he spent the most of his time in the White Palace to offer their worship to him. The citizens of Hallownest fashioned king's idols so that they could physically thank and revere him, even if it was from a distance. The king's knights were also given ornate seals as symbols of their service to the kingdom. Every bug had a role in this melting pot of culture. While the grubs could tunnel through the caverns as they awaited metamorphosis,
Il
not
larvone
every
gigante,
citizen
sì.
had this ability. To navigate the kingdom, the citizens of Hallownest could have travelled by foot through Kingdom's Way, and a lot did. The king did, however, implement other forms of travel. Hallownest was home to the stag beetle. These large bugs loved to run, and with Hallownest as their home, they ran through the long, empty tunnels of the land. To give the stags a role in the kingdom, stag stations were opened up across the land. In essence, if
Grazie
a
a
bug
Dio.
required transportation to the other end of Hallownest, they simply rang a bell and a stag would be there. These stations opened up the kingdom even more. From Dirtmouth, Greenpath, the Fog Canyon, the capital city, and even Deepnest, the stags of Hallownest navigated the long tunnels for the citizens. A station was also constructed in Queen's Gardens. However, only few were permitted to utilize this path. The stags loved their role in Hallownest, and after a long day of work, they returned to the stag nest, their home and place of birth. It was here that they swapped stories about interesting passengers, spoke of new tunnels they had discovered, and raised their young. The stag stations were immensely important. Even still, the king also implemented another system to traverse Hallownest. A tram system. In their construction of the tram line, the tracks ran from the resting grounds, the crossroads, Kingdom's Edge, and the basin close to where the White Palace had been constructed. The workers did also attempt to manufacture a line that ran through Deepnest, but the Spider Tribe killed anyone who stepped on their land. As a result, the construction of this line was abandoned.
Ok, lì non
With
c'è.
a dream to craft the perfect nail and nails for the land's fighters, a nailsmith set up a workshop just outside of the capital city. Even in a mostly safe kingdom like Hallownest, there were still dangers. To create this perfect weapon, the smith sought out pale ore, a rare ore connected somehow to the higher pale beings of the land. With their weapons, warriors came to the ultimate Nailmaster Sly for training in the art of combat. Oro, Mato, and Shio were just 3 known students. The Fog Canyon became home to one of Hallownest's greatest minds, Monomon the Teacher. In this region, thick with fog and
Medusacce
cackling
de me.
electricity, this large jellyfish had her archive constructed. It was here that she
Ah, giusto,
researched the
l'archivio.
land, its inhabitants, and stored the kingdom's knowledge. As a teacher, she also offered her knowledge to her students, one of which was Quirrell. This golden age of Hallownest truly offered a place for every bug, creature, and traveller. It was because of the culture and traditions the Pale King had perfectly crafted that the 5 great knights of Hallownest were revered. Zemur had travelled from a land serene and brought with her the delicate flower. Immensely fragile flowers that contained a power that, even now, few understand. Isma was regarded as a kind warrior and had some connection to the acid lakes of Hallownest. Although unconfirmed, this suggests that she could have had some sort of connection to Un. Hegemol was the largest of the Great Five and was known to make his friends laugh. Drya was the fiercest of the warriors, and then there was Ogrim, the knight who took his oath to the kingdom the most seriously. While the kingdom thrived just outside of the borders, the tribe of Deepnest suffered a great loss. The ruler died, and control of Deepnest was left to their partner, Hera. While only a common beast, the weavers and spiders of Deepnest still regarded her as their queen, and under her rule, they attempted to move on from their loss. Under the worship and leadership of the Pale King, a barren cavern of simple bugs had transformed into a grand civilization with doctors, adventurers, singers, poets, traders, and so many more. Over these ages, the king's guiding light had helped them thrive, but his influence had also extinguished another. The Moth tribe had initially turned their backs on their creator upon the arrival of the worm, and over this time, they had forgotten her. The Radiants, however, would not be forgotten. The ancient light of the Radiants had been forgotten by the Moths of Hallownest. In an attempt to make them and the rest of the population of the kingdom remember her, the Radiants entered their dreams. As they slept, the citizens dreamt of a burning light, and she appeared to them. This light threatened to break their minds as it pulled the first victims into a deep slumber. When they awoke, they became feral and aggressive as they reverted back to the simple minds of their ancestors before the arrival and gift of sapience from the king. That was, if they accepted the call of union she offered in these dreams. The majority of Hallownest dreamt of this forgotten light, and the king urged his people to resist the forgotten light that plagued their dreams. As a result of these desperate attempts to be remembered, and the king's orders to ignore and reject her, these dreams and light manifested into an infection. Over his time in Hallownest, the Pale King had explored the void and understood that the Radiants threatened to destroy everything he had formed. He had to act. Interestingly enough, within Mantis Village, the Mantis were naturally immune to her call. The Radiants existed solely within the Dream Realm, so the Pale King and White Lady formed a plan to completely remove her connection to the waking world. The madness of the infection spread across the entire kingdom of Hallownest as the population declined quickly. To seal the Radiance and her influence away mentally and physically, the king turned to the void. Only an entity, a vessel with no mind to think, no will to break, and no voice to cry, born of God and void, could hold the Radiance. The Pale King had created several void constructs to protect and maintain the kingdom over the ages. This one would just be harder to perfect. In a union of worm and root, the Pale King and White Lady had many children. Each one was birthed in the abyss, where they died, were hollowed out, and then inhabited by void. The king and queen murdered what appeared to be thousands of their children in an attempt to create a pure vessel that could contain the Radiance. To the king, no cost was too great to save his kingdom from the infection. The void shades of the abandoned children were left at the bottom of the abyss as the king sought out that one
quindi è
perfect
questo quello che
vessel.
sono, me lo sono sempre
And when the
chiesto.
pure vessel eventually revealed itself, the king left the abyss with it and sealed the entrance behind him. His discarded children were simply left down there. The creation of this pure vessel had come at a great cost, but it was important to save the kingdom. The vessel, however, was just one part of the containment of the Radiance. As the king brought the pure vessel to the White Palace to raise it for its purpose, the king began the second stage of the plan. The pure vessel, when grown, would be sealed within the Temple of the Black Egg, but powerful seals had to be formed to keep it closed, to trap it inside. Seals that only 3 powerful dreamers would form if they entered an eternal sleep. Lurien the Watcher volunteered for this role out of loyalty to his king, and Monoman the Teacher
sono
of
loro.
Fog Canyon
Ok.
also accepted this great responsibility. For the third and final seal, the Pale King reached out to Hera the Beast of Deepnest. Although her tribe had refused to become a part of Hallownest, the Radiance infection had also affected them. Even so, Hera had a request. Hera had lost her partner, but she desperately wanted a child. In a union between tribes, the Pale King gave Hera the Beast what she desired. Together, they created a child of God and the Beast. As Deepnest awaited the birth of their queen's spawn, the Pale King returned to the White Palace and spent time with the vessel, his child. Over this time, the vessel was seen by the population of Hallownest as their savior that would seal away the Radiance, their Hollow Knight. Soon, the time came and the Hollow Knight was brought to the Temple of the Black Egg, and it was chained within. In a ritual, the Radiance was summoned to the Knight's dream, and as it had no will, no mind, and no suffering, the light was trapped within. Across Hallownest, the Dreamers prepared to complete their role in this
Big Mitch,
plan.
buonasera.
Monoman the Teacher stored herself within her archives. As a dreamer, the power of this ritual already protected her to an extent. However, she also put in place another level of security. The teacher formed a connection between her mask and the container she would be placed in to dream. If someone or something did attempt to access her physical form, they would require her mask. A mask that she gave to her apprentice, Quirrell. To protect his
Lui, è
teacher,
vero.
Quirrell left Hallownest with the mask, and as he moved further away from the king's beacon, his memories of this crumbling kingdom faded away. Within the capital city, at the peak of the Watcher's Spire, Lurien the Watcher lay down and slept as his Watcher Knights protected the entrance to his body. Over in Deepnest, Hera the Beast and the Spider Tribe were overjoyed with the birth of their princess, Hornet. Hera was only able to spend a small
Hornet è la
amount
loro
of time
figlia,
with her
allora.
child before she had to enter the Beast Den to
Delfide, grazie
also
mille del follow.
go
Benvenuta.
to sleep. As the 3 dreamers went to sleep,
Ciao, Giocanosa.
they entered the dream realm and became seals on the Temple of the Black Egg. With the Radiance sealed away, trapped within the Hollow Knight inside the Black Egg Temple, sealed by the Dreamers, the kingdom breathed a sigh of relief. Many of the bugs went to the temple to pray, and a memorial fountain was constructed inside of the walls of the capital city. A structure to remind them of the great sacrifice that not only
Per
the
chi lo sta
Hollow Knight
chiedendo,
had made,
stiamo
but
guardando
also
un video
the
sulla
Dreamers.
storia e la lore di Hollow Knight.
The
L'originale.
creation of the Hollow Knight and sacrifice of the Dreamers to save the kingdom weighed heavily on the White Lady. It was her children that had been discarded in the abyss to find that one pure vessel. She felt shame for her role in this plan. To stop herself from the creation of future offspring, the White Lady traveled to the Queen's Gardens. With her powers of roots, she bound herself to the ground. Unable to defend herself, Dryar of the Great 5 Knights of Hallownest took an oath to stand watch of her queen and protect her from any harm. Despite everything the Pale King and the Dreamers had
Ma
done
quanto è
to
bello
save
sto
the
video,
kingdom,
che lavoro hanno
even
fatto.
after the sacrifice of the Hollow Knight,
Soprattutto non ho
the
capito
Radiance
come.
once again appeared in the dreams of the bugs of Hallownest. The vessel had been pure upon its selection by the king. However, during its time in the White Palace, it had forged a connection with its father. An idea had been instilled, it had a mind, thoughts, and it had become impure. The order of the events during this period are murky. Regardless, none of them were good. The Moskin of Greenpath were mostly unaffected by the infection, but this aggressive attack on the kingdom did amplify their desire to be reunited with Un. The miners in Crystal Peak fell, some even merged with the crystals they mined and became mad and aggressive. The mushroom tribe of the fungal wastes that had once allowed pilgrims to traverse their land also became actively hostile against most they encountered. Alongside this, several spoke of a master herald that would signal age's end, a rumored deity that had its own mind outside of the hive mind they shared, a mushroom that went by the name Mr. Mushroom. Reports showed that he traveled across Hallownest unhindered by the infection. As the death toll increased, the kingdom attempted to reduce the spread. The Spirit's Glade was sealed, and the capital city of Hallownest closed its gates so that no one could enter and no one could leave. The tram and stag stations were shut down. In doing this, the stags slowly fell into isolation. Without a bell to be heard to signal them, they were also forgotten about. Because of this, every region within Hallownest became isolated. The rock base of the cavern above the capital city cracked, and with it, the waters of the cavern of Blue Lake dripped from above. This gave the capital city the name it would be remembered for, the City of Tears. Although the gates have been closed, the Radiant still wiped out large chunks of the population within. As for their history and records, the parchments of spider silk became ineligible. In these dire times, there were some who still had hope. The Soul Master of the Soul Sanctum saw in his dreams that the cure for this infection could be attained through pure focus, an ability granted through the consumption and manipulation of soul. This dream, however, was a nasty trick by the Radiance. The Pale King ordered that this line of thought be abandoned, but the Soul Master could not understand why his leader refused to at least try to stop the Moth of Light. This Master of Soul believed that if they could use the substance that animated their very bodies, it would help them defeat the infection. So he ignored the Pale King. Within the Soul Sanctum, the Soul Master and his scholars hoarded the soul totems of the kingdom and slowly became intoxicated by its power. The intensity of this substance deformed many of them as it mutated their body into mistakes. The Soul Master, however, did retain his shape
si spiegano tanti dei mostri
in the Soul Sanctum. Close by, one member of the upper class of the city watched as the population was driven into madness. Emelita had been cast out by those she had once called friends, and she reveled in their madness. She locked herself in a tower and watched the chaos unfold. Emelita enjoyed the show. The madness of the infection simply evaded her. Over in the Mantis village, their natural immunity allowed them to ride out the initial infection as they dealt with other issues. The daughter of one of their leaders had entered into a relationship with an outsider. This was not just any outsider, it was Zamir of the Great Five Knights of Hallownest. The Mantis leaders ordered that this relationship be put to an end, but it did not stop the connection they had for each other. This natural immunity to the Radiance, for the most part, was fantastic for the Mantis tribe. There were some, however, who believed if they chose to worship her light, they would be gifted with power. Unfortunately for the Mantis, one of their 4 leaders fell to this lure. Branded the traitor lord, this leader turned on his sisters. In response, the sisters forced those who had fallen for the Radiance's light out of Mantis village. Without a home, The Mantis traitors claimed a new territory within Queen's Gardens, an act of aggression not only against but also the White Lady. These traitors did attempt to dominate this land, but they were met by the power of Drya. Ultimately, she fell to the constant waves of Mantis attacks in defense of her queen, but the traitors also fell to the infection as they became simple-minded creatures. Although Drya had given her life for the White Lady, this higher being of root had grown so much since she had settled on this land. She was completely unaware that her protector had fallen. Interestingly enough, even some of the Mosskin turned their backs on and actively chose to worship the Radiance. The Moss Prophet and their followers believed Hallownest would be born again and united in the Radiance's blazing image. To worship her, they called out to the Moth in the Moss
Ogni tanto
Chapel.
mossa dei punti che mi
Hallownest
ricordo,
had
però
fallen
è difficilissimo
so far in
tenerli
such a
connessi,
short amount of time.
mentalmente
The
intendo.
streets filled with bodies, many bugs reverted to a mind without sapience, and the regions of this kingdom separated. The Pale King's vision for a grand civilization had failed. Within the hive, the bees had lived independently away from the kingdom of Hallownest, but after their queen grew too large for the hive and died, they too fell to the lure of the Radiance after the infection seeped into their home and took over. In an action that surprised a few that still lived, the Pale King pulled the White Palace from the physical realm and transported it into the Dream Realm along with his followers and servants. In these awful times, the Traitor Lord's daughter died and was buried in Queen's Gardens. Upon the notification of this news, her partner, Zamir, chose to renounce her duties as a Great Knight, entered the resting grounds, and became the Grey Mourner. Within the royal waterways, Isma entered a grove. Inside, she passed away to unknown means. Just outside, Ogrim defended her grove and waited for her. As for the fifth and final Great Knight of Hallownest, Hegamol, his fate is unknown. His armor was stolen as he slept by a maggot desperate to defend its kin. After that, no one knows.
Infatti mi sembrava di
During this
rivedere
entire
quell'armatura.
period, deep down in the abyss, some of the discarded vessels managed to climb out of their tomb. The king had sealed the entrance to this place, but they discovered a secret way out. With access to the kingdom, some stayed to explore it, while one left it entirely.
Ok, ragazzi, questa è la prima parte di tutto il video sulla storia e la lore di Hollow Knight e siamo appunto più o meno alla metà e ho pensato che fosse il caso di arrivare fin qui. La prossima la vedremo domani, però non vi preoccupate perché ho calcolato la cosa per farla proprio in 2 giorni distinti e quindi dovrebbe cascare perfetta per le live di questa settimana. D'accordo, gente? È affascinante, si fa anche fatica a tenere il filo di tutto quanto e mai nella vita avrei saputo unire tutti quanti i puntini senza senza un video di recap. Purtroppo io non sono uno di quelli bravi a raccogliere le cose e unire mentalmente i puntini un po' alla Souls, no? Che è uno dei motivi per cui non mi piace quel tipo di giochi e grazie a Dio esistono video così. Comunque è molto affascinante la storia e oltretutto mancano ancora tutte le cose che riguardano, credo, il nostro protagonista in una maniera o nell'altra, giusto? E quindi niente ragazzi, ci vediamo con il prossimo segmento la prossima volta, lo finiamo a vedere molto presto, d'accordo?